LEGO Marvel Superheroes is LEGO Batman 2, but Marvel. It's a bit of a surprise it took them this long. Batman got in on the action pretty immediately, but despite the MCU being the MCU, they really dragged their feet on getting into the gaming market, and the few attempts they did make were fairly ill-advised licensed games from like Activision or whoever. Marvel had a lot of potential in gaming, and at least some of it is realized here. It got exactly what these games need, a giant roster of varied characters, iconic villains, and some ability to be silly. Much of what this game does follows and improves on LEGO Batman 2, an open world city, a singular narrative involving a huge pile of villains, and drawing from a variety of sources without completely tying itself to the movies. Although at the time of this game's release in 2013, the first Avengers was still pretty fresh, so they didn't have that much to draw on. As could be expected, the game was on everything, initially launching for PC, Xbox 360, PS3, and Wii U, with PS4 and Xbox One versions about a month later. And the game eventually got ported to the Switch in 2021 for some reason, while smaller versions, subtitled Universe and Peril, came out for the DS, 3DS, Vita, and smartphones. LEGO Marvel is clearly taking notes on the last couple games. As well, it largely is LEGO Batman 2 The Marvel Years. It incorporates and improves on some stuff from everything in this open world era. The open world is about the same as the last few size-wise, with a return to Batman's fairly to-scale cityscape. Although Manhattan does have a fair bit more variety. Central Park is a good chunk of green, the buildings get smaller as you fan out from the Empire State Building, and the X-Mansion and Liberty Island lose all the cityness. A lot of minor changes add up to make this open world substantially better to explore. The field of view is a decent bit wider, and while the camera is still very strict about remaining behind you, the wiggle room is a little more generous, and these are huge for improving flying and driving. Speaking on flying, it's still kinda odd and hard to control admittedly, but the ability to fly straight up, to stop on a dime, and that the flyer's no longer hard 180 when within 10 feet of a wall makes it way less frustrating. It does feel bizarre that you can't control verticality with the stick, instead needing to hold X to go up and circle to go down. It kinda works if you're going at moderate speeds, but in races it makes it very hard to adjust altitude on the fly, as tapping circle twice makes you drop like a rock. Micro adjustments are not a part of flying here, despite how often you're made to fly precisely. Speaking of races, man, there's a lot of them, and I have no idea why. I understand to some extent they solved LEGO Batman 2's issue, where Superman could bypass most gold bricks based on platforming and puzzles, as Iron Man probably could here. But also, man, these flying races especially are tedious as hell. Returning from LEGO Lord of the Rings are missions. This is a pretty cute idea and actually makes more sense here than it did there. It shows the Marvel heroes saving and helping regular people and just being superheroes, and the missions have a good mixture of small arena battles or mini bosses or puzzles and a little bit of platforming. Not that all that many of them are like winners or like super memorable, but they're a good fit for the Marvel universe, and they break up the pacing of the overworld a little bit better than just running around doing races. The map is also hugely improved for finding collectibles, showing everything in portions of the map you've been to from the get-go, and displaying nearby stuff on the mini-map, but also allowing you to easily mark paths to whatever you're seeking, and supplementing that with detectors. You're thankfully not left circling the drain looking for some collectible you missed by an inch. It's really smooth and streamlined exploration that's killed a lot of the rough edges and growing pains that LEGO Batman 2 had, and 2 players can mark different objectives, which was not possible in that last game. There's also a slew of small bonus levels that are unlocked for getting gold bricks, which is a great motivator because most of the time getting all the collectibles doesn't do all that much outside of maybe 1 or 2 extra characters. Characters in the game are extremely varied, which keeps characters who have powers you already have exciting. There's a lot of novel ability combinations, especially ones with flying, that serve as fun upgrades for exploration. Characters like Iron Man can fly, hack, have lasers and missiles, and Spider-Man can swing and pull things and has sense, and there's a lot of characters that just have a lot going on. Speaking of, the game benefits from a huge range of powers, old and new, with a ton of variety between them. Flying is crazy powerful as it was in Batman 2, it breaks every level not designed around having a flying character in story mode. It's fun, it's the fastest way to get around, it's great. There are also a few minor variants on flight. Web swingers like Spider-Man can swing web to web to get around, and while it is functional, it's much slower. Several characters can also float, which is substantially less broken, but allows certain characters to cross medium-sized gaps. And Storm has a unique variant where the tornado she floats around on can put out fire. Explosives destroy silver, lasers destroy gold, smart guys can hack computers, big guys can lift heavy stuff and throw them around, and can also smash certain walls, although they're unable to build stuff, which is a fairly big downside. Although some of these characters like Hulk and Venom can transform into smaller forms to bypass this, among others I'm sure. And super strength characters like Thor can smash big guy walls even if they can't lift the huge obstacles. Ropes, webs, and stretchy limbs can be used like grapples to pull hooks from a distance, Sense can reveal invisible objects, Mr. Fantastic specifically can transform into various objects in marked panels, squeeze through vents, and can glide. Venom and Sandman can also fit through vents and have specific panels of their own to pass through. Shield characters, including psychic shields, can reflect projectiles from enemies, redirect lasers in specific spots, and walk through fire. Invisible characters can sneak past cameras, claw characters can dig up buried objects and activate specific panels, electric characters can charge generators. Storm and Thor need to charge up first to use this ability, but others like Odin can get some advantage from not needing to charge first. Ice can freeze water to make platforms or use it against enemies, which is amusing. Psychics can build with purple blocks or mind control NPC characters for a few small puzzles. Magnet characters can manipulate blue blocks. Galactus can build with cosmic bricks, and Ant-Man can shrink down to fit inside of 5 or 6 mazes in the overworld. In short, there's a lot of abilities, and they're thoroughly mixed and matched to keep levels fresh. Levels are basically the standard LEGO fare, not that there's anything wrong with that. Notably though, they're extremely episodic. There is an overarching narrative with a big villain team-up, but outside of a loose motivation for disparate baddies to join up and a way to get us into a variety of settings, it doesn't come to a head until towards the very end of the game. Instead, the game has lots of charming little team-up stories where characters who rarely get paired up are given some time together to throw around jokes at one another, and to create some unique gameplay from their combinations of powers. It keeps the game really fresh, which is something these games have admittedly done well, at least for the last few as it is, but this game adds a nice bit of unpredictability as you find out what the next level has in store for you. The presentation has one bizarre major flaw. Character design is all over the place, and it's entirely Disney's fault. Characters that had been in the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies up to this game's release, including characters like Iron Man, Thor, and Nick Fury, are based on their actors and designs in those movies, and they actually do a pretty good job of condensing those likenesses down to minifigure form. However, they stand out sharply compared to the rest of the cast. Due to complicated film rights issues, even characters who have had movies can't use their live-action designs. With Sony having Spider-Man, Universal having a very bizarre deal for the Hulk, I can't get into it, it's too weird, and Fox having the X-Men and Fantastic Four. And all these listed examples have major characters who appear in the story. Even then, these aren't consistent. Most characters, Spidey and the Hulk included, use fairly traditional comics designs from the characters' oldest appearances. However, the X-Men use designs that appear to be their animated series designs, and others are taken from alternate universes like the Ultimate Universe, which uses a more realistic art style that clashes with the cartoonier look a majority of the roster has, although the Ultimate's characters are limited to unlockable characters, which makes it more justifiable as they're not directly in the main story. I also know that this is a Disney mandate because going forward they'll demand this same thing with Marvel vs. Capcom and presumably the later LEGO Marvel games. Beyond that though, the game looks pretty good. You got a solid variety in the overworld, as I said before, and the game is pretty seamless, when playing the PS4 version on the PS5 anyway. Iron Man and other flying characters can cruise pretty fast, and the frame rate doesn't suffer, and the game doesn't seem to need to buffer or load despite the size. Levels also have a lot of variety. Being free to the constraints of the movies let them go pretty wild, with ideas like the inside of the Statue of Liberty and the ocean floor, although there's a good handful of ones that are just set in skyscrapers or laboratories. The music is orchestral superhero music. Genuinely can't even figure out if it's from the movies for the most part, although it may as well be for how memorable it is. The only exception is the theme that plays when you highlight the icon on the PS5 menu, the Merry Marvel Marching Society, which is a song that's amusing once and loops endlessly. After that, anytime you hover over the LEGO Marvel on the menu, it's so obnoxious, especially if you quit out of the game and just want to sit on the home menu for a second before you flip to YouTube and grab a sandwich and you listen to the LEGO Merry Marvel Marching Society song for 7 straight fucking... it's awful. Framing the game's overarching plot around Galactus is a good move, if for no other reason than it can stand apart from the movies. Galactus is kinda goofy. In the comics you can get away with it probably, I haven't read them, because a lack of motion creates a layer of abstraction, but even that goofy ass Fantastic Four movie chickened out and made Galactus a giant space cloud. He's enough of a threat to actually, push the story forward as it reaches its climax and give it some excitement, but goofy enough to pair with a Lego game. The villains also, at least partially, are concerned with Galactus. Doctor Doom and Loki serve as the primary villains, Loki notably fresh off being the villain in the Avengers movie, and they assemble all the other goobers for the purposes of collecting the cosmic bricks, pieces of the Silver Surfer's surfboard thing, in order to use them to stop Galactus, and then also take over the world after. The game begins with its most generic pairing. Iron Man, Spider-Man, and Hulk are the big three for Marvel, but they're also notably fun characters to use. Iron Man especially because, he has every power in the game at once, and flying. And these characters all go on to feature in a good chunk of the game's levels, being paired up with more obscure characters. The villain pairing is a bit more unique with Sandman and Abomination, although Abomination is kind of thrown out pretty quick, while he does become oddly recurrent in this story. Sand Central Station feels much less tutorially than these games typically start. I think Traveler's Tales finally realized the signposting is strong enough that the game can just let it start with a bang, and it does. This game definitely seems higher on the LEGO budget spectrum than some of the others, with the big Sandman being made of a bunch of little studs, which is a great little effect, and while the fight is a fairly basic puzzle boss where each character needs to activate some stuff so Hulk can toss boxes at him, the intro and story do a really good job of setting up the stakes, the format, and the style of the game early on. Times Square Off has Mr. Fantastic and Captain America team up. These two are also quite frequent additions to pairings, although I think it goes without saying that they're not quite the other guys, which is why Spider-Man also shows up here halfway. Dr. Octopus is alone here, but it does facilitate a fun series of rooftop chases and a decent boss, like a Lord of the Rings boss, dodging attacks to get him stuck for retaliation. The laboratory limits you to two simpler characters with Black Widow and Arrow Guy. Both have projectiles and simpler movesets. The game can't quite have that, so Spider-Man shows up too. I'm not really sure why Green Goblin is here. He's quickly replaced by Venom, and they really do go all out on Venom. The enemies that are infected with the Venom goo move like zombies, and the goo hangs all over the scenery. There's even a Lego Venom jump scare, which is kind of just such a ridiculous idea that it kind of just loops into being funny. While most of the fight against Venom is building radios and other loud stuff to progress, you do at one point get to burn him with a flamethrower, which is cool. The jail has a nice rainy atmosphere and introduces Wolverine, so he, Iron Man, and the Hulk can face off against Magneto, Abomination, and Sabretooth. The most notable thing here is Iron Man's suit breaking, which actually affects the next level more than this one. Everything else is kinda just standard. Abomination is a quick time event, Magneto is a guy you throw stuff at. It's got some cool visuals, but it's not a standout. The level in Stark Tower is the big payoff to the last level, and probably the best level in this game. Captain America and suitless Tony Stark have to break into Stark Tower. Aldrich Killian and Mandarin, probably not coincidentally the villains of Iron Man 3, take over the tower, and throughout the level, Tony needs to upgrade to better and better suits, starting powerless, then getting the flightless Mark 1, and eventually getting the Mark 42 with the heat beam and restoring his flight. It's a very unique way to build a level, slowly going from needing to rely on Captain America to being relied on. And while the battle against the villain duo is nothing special, I do like when the Mandarin steals the Hulkbuster armor and Iron Man sends the army of armors at it. Also suspiciously similar to Iron Man 3, but a neat little climax for the level. Then the smaller scale guys, Black Widow, Arrow Guy, and Captain America infiltrate Hydra base to fight Red Skull. It's a weaker setting, and the weaker protagonists are kinda undermined by the Human Torch. Flyers are just the most fun in this game. If the Stark Tower stage felt suspiciously close to Iron Man 3, the Bifrost and Asgard one feels like a mashup of the first two Thor movies, the latter of which was so recent it got a DLC pack in this game for its characters. Captain America, Wolverine, Thor, and the Human Torch form a strong group, and Asgard's Rainbow Bridge is really strong visually. The setting is pretty directly Thor 2, but the boss is that weird ugly robot thing from Thor 1, which is kinda funny. The game then jumps to the X-Men, a pleasant diversion given the way Disney and Marvel would often treat the X-Men pre-Fox merger. As you'd expect, the roster is fairly broad, with Jean Grey, Cyclops, Storm, Iceman, and Beast, and is a nice dynamic exploration of the X-Mansion as Juggernaut smashes through walls, causes fire, and endangers students which need to be rescued, which does change the pace up of the level a little bit. Somehow the fight against Juggernaut is partially one of those ones where you have to throw a projectile back at them. I kinda thought these were gone, but glad to see they never failed to bring it back. The raid on Doctor Doom's castle has a neat setting. I think it's Doom's castle, but you fight the Green Goblin. This one is notably a Fantastic Four level, with all four of that team's members: the Human Torch, Mr. Fantastic, Invisible Woman, The Thing, and Samuel L. Jackson, which, like the X-Men, is something I imagine won't happen in the later LEGO Marvel games because of Disney. The submarine level with MODOK as the villain starts out standard, with Iron Man, Thor, and Spider-Man, which is a very standard roster. However, the walk along the bottom of the ocean is an insanely creative setting for one of these games. Jean Grey's force field keeps the water out, and she'll follow the players around. It needs to be directed to give yourself room to interact with stuff. It's really unique and creative. After this, Magneto pilots the Statue of Liberty as Hulk, Mr. Fantastic, and Wolverine attempt to stop its rampage. The interior of the statue is another really interesting setting, and it actually has some platforming to get up to the top of it, where, you know, this game is very action-focused as the Batmans were. And Mastermind has a really cute gimmick for a boss, as he possesses one of the characters in the party and forces the other two to fight them. The island level is pretty, at least. Most of it is Captain America and the Thing, and most of it is spent reflecting lasers from turrets. As cool as big guys like the Thing are, between mauling hordes of enemies, they don't really have a lot going on, honestly. Storm joining towards the end is nice though, she's a fun little mix-up. Magneto and Rhino team up for the villains this one. I like that Rhino is fought primarily by baiting him into smashing into stuff, which is something a little different, even if it's not like the most unique idea in video games. And Magneto is revealed to actually be Mystique, which doesn't actually have that much impact besides the fact that Magneto just is the boss of the next level as well. Iron Man, Spider-Man, and Thor fight the actual Magneto. The level leading up to him is pretty short, and the fight isn't nearly epic enough. I like Magneto's construct thing visually, but it's a fairly plotting one where you wait out attacks to build something to harm him. Doctor Doom's space station has some pretty views and a good cast. Spidey, Thing, Storm, Cap. But for the Doctor Doom boss fight level, I mean, Doom is fought by smashing a bunch of his generic bots in waves. It's kind of disappointing for his ending. The finale does pull out all the stops though for a big climax. The story finally gets an actual development as Loki betrays Doom and uses the cosmic bricks to control Galactus. This is enough to get all the heroes and villains on the same side temporarily, which gives some fun combinations to play with in the final level. There are 4 groups on the helicarrier that each solve some puzzles to get Galactus to piss off, comprised of various heroes and villains. Galactus pretty consistently attacks or shakes the helicarrier that everyone's on to disrupt things, which is really like fun and cool visually since he's looming over in the background. It's got Spectacle, it's got Venom and Iron Man teaming up, it's got flying around on the Green Goblin's glider. It's a really strong finale for the scale and spectacle alone, plus, you know, how often do you get to see giant Lego Galactus attempting to eat a giant flying spaceship thing? Weirdly enough, this game ends on a mid-credits scene, much like the movies do, and it would actually eventually get paid off in 2017 in LEGO Marvel Super Heroes 2, but that's 4 years later. That's like a surprisingly big gap. The Guardians of the Galaxy come down and talk to Nick Fury and basically say, someday there's going to be some threat from space. They very vaguely allude to it, and I imagine the Guardians of the Galaxy were picked because that movie was then upcoming, like next on the roster, or very close to next when this game was releasing. There's also a surprising amount of bonus missions. Most of these games have done a Lego City and called it a day, and this one also has a Lego City, just like a tiny little version of Manhattan. It's pretty bland, honestly. But this game also has 11 additional missions that are unlocked at certain gold brick milestones, which are each like 1 to 2 rooms and feature even wackier team-ups on the hero and villain sides, even featuring a few villain-starring ones, but these levels are only like maybe 5 minutes long. Some of the more amusing team-ups are Dr. Octopus and Agent Coulson, that guy who dies in the Avengers and they have to go smash up the Daily Bugle, Hawkeye and Black Widow teaming up with Ghost Rider to fight some monster thing at a circus. There's a level that's just flagrantly a Thor 2 advertisement where Thor and Loki team up against the weird evil elf guy from that movie. And of course, the greatest team up of all time, Howard the Duck and the Vulture robbing a bank together, among others. I love these as a way to unlock new characters and to space out the overworld grind with some actual short little level segments. Like, these aren't the greatest levels ever designed, they're kind of just throwaway little 5-minute rewards, but given how often like the rewards in these games for getting 100% is like Aunt May, it's a nice reward to get some extra little level chunks and funny team-ups and a little bit of funny dialogue. Although each one of these little things is introduced by Deadpool. He's very annoying. LEGO Marvel Super Heroes is great. If you followed my LEGO series, you'll likely remember, or could have guessed from my comments here, that I really liked the direction that LEGO Batman 2 took things, but found it had a lot of rough edges. And this game is just an extremely clean, polished version of that, with the edges around things like the flying controls, the driving, and the small issues with the open world sanded down. The levels remain as strong as ever, especially with the addition of the cute little bonus levels. Characters have very strong variety in their abilities, and the levels themselves have a lot of variety through the constantly shifting cast level to level in the hero and villain side. There's a lot of funny little dialogue, even if a majority of the story doesn't have anything going on, where the heroes and villains have silly little interactions that are charming enough, even if they're not laugh out loud funny. And the story also utilizes a few characters that the movies haven't gotten around to and probably never will get around to. Galactus is one that they'll probably never get around to. Doctor Doom, I mean, he'll probably be in whatever that weird-looking Fantastic Four movie, but, it's a lot of characters we haven't seen in a while who come together and play off each other in funny and novel ways. And it pays off with a really impressive finale in the end. It's a fantastic start to the LEGO Marvel sub-series. It looks like it's going to be a really strong one if it keeps up this pace, just like the Lego Batman and Lego Star Wars sub-series have traditionally been very strong. And I look forward to seeing where they take it from here. It's kind of the perfection of this new Lego formula that Batman 2 crafted, and has a legitimate claim to being the best one yet, honestly, although I still love me Lego Star Wars 3. But this one, real solid contender.
Marching right along to the fighting song of the merry Marvel Marching Society.
March along, march along, march along, march along to the merry Marvel Marching Society.